Today we're going to be talking about tissues of the body, part 2. Specifically, connective tissue. We have dense connective tissue, adipose tissue, areolar tissue, cartilage, compact bone, blood, and lymph. Now it is the most diverse type of tissue because it can go from bone, which is really hard, to blood, which is fluid, to fat, which is squishy. So it's most diverse. It has two basic components. It has a living cell of some sort, and then a matrix around it. Now that matrix is made up of extracellular protein fibers and a ground state fluid. These are never exposed to the outside environment, and they are mostly vascular. So most of them get a blood supply directly to them. Most of them. And they do contain receptors such as pain and pressure and temperature receptors. The functions of the connective tissue are going to be support and protection, material transportation, energy storage such as fat cells, and body defense that help produce antibodies and protect the body. Now we have three classifications. Connective tissue proper, which are going to be our ligaments and our tendons. We have fluid connective tissues, which are going to be our blood and lymph. And we have supportive connective tissues, which are going to be our cartilage and bone. Looking into the connective tissue proper, we have four types of cells. We have fibroblasts, which are the most abundant, and they are fixed, so they stay in one stationary position. They help produce and maintain the fibers and the ground state around the other living cells. We have macrophages, which are cells that eat damaged cells or pathogens. They do phagocytosis, which means, you remember, bringing in large molecules. They release chemicals to mobilize or start up the immune system. They again can be fixed or they can be free-floating. We have fat cells or adipose cells or adipocytes, and the contents vary depending on the different regions that it's in. Now these are going to be fixed. They do not move around throughout the body. Finally, we have the mast cells, which are the beginning line of defense for when something is injured or there's an infection. And these are mobile. Now the connective tissue, like I said, has fibers, and they have three types of fibers. We have collagen fibers, which are the most common. They're long, straight, and unbranched. We have elastin fibers, which contain a protein elastin, and it's branchy and wavy. And then we have reticular fibers, which are the least common, and they are thin, and they branch, and they're in various organs. So in this picture of our connective tissue proper, we see reticular fibers here that are branched and really thin. We have a fixed macrophage here that's just waiting around to signal for the immune system to start up or to digest and bring in damaged cells or pathogens. We have an antibody producing cell, a blood vessel. We have adipose tissues, which is our adipocyte, our ground state, which surrounds all of this. We have a white blood cell, such as a leukocyte. We have a stem cell, a fibroblast, a free macrophage that can roam, collagen fibers, elastin fibers, and mast cells. Now the ground tissue, or the material fluid around all of these components, fills the space between the cells, surrounds the connective tissue fibers, and is typically clear, colorless, and thick, like syrup. So it's very viscous. It allows slow movement of bacteria and pathogens, because they actually have to push through this thick, syrupy ground slate. Connective tissue proper has multiple classifications. They can have loose connective tissue, or the areolar tissue. It is least specialized. It is highly vascular, which means it has lots of blood supply to it. It separates the skin from the muscle, providing a padding and allows independent movement. It has a blood supply that provides nutrients from nearby epithelial cells. The second type is going to be our adipose tissue. It is loose connective tissue that has dominated by fat cells, or adipocytes. Provides padding and shock absorption. It is under the skin of sides, the buttocks, the breast, behind the eyes, and surrounds the kidney. The next type is our dense connective tissue. It is mostly collagen fibers. There are two types. There is regular, which we see parallel fibers tightly packed together, and we'll see these in our ligaments and tendons. And then we see dense irregular, that contain interwoven collagen fibers. And you see this in the skin, and it gives us its strength. Now moving on from our connective tissue proper to our fluid connective tissues. There's going to be two types. We have the blood and the lymph. They both contain living cells surrounded by a fluid matrix. So in the blood, we have the watery substance called the plasma. Then we have erythrocytes, or red blood cells, that contain half the volume. And then sometimes we also have white blood cells, or leukocytes, and platelets, or thrombocytes, that also help in creating the living cells. So lymph. It is formed when interstitial fluids, or the fluids of the tissues, enter the lymphatic vessels. It allows the body to monitor for infection. So the lymph system is where our immune cells gather and flow and check to make sure that our body is not infected. So we have plasma, lymph, interstitial fluid, comprise the majority of the extracellular fluid. Now moving on to our supportive connective tissue. So we've talked about connective tissue proper, fluid connective tissue, and now we're talking about supportive connective tissue. Cartilage, the firm gel containing embedded fibers. It is avascular, or at least most of it. The cartilage itself does not get blood supply. The chondrocyte, which is the living cell, is only found in the matrix. It is found in a pocket called the lacuna. You can kind of remember this because it sort of sounds like a paradise. And it's a pocket called the lacuna. Inside of it is where we find the chondrocyte. It produces chemicals that discourage blood vessel growth in the cartilage. The cartilage itself is covered by a perichondrium. The perichondrium is where the blood flow actually comes to. So through the perichondrium is how the chondrocyte gets its nutrients. Now, since there is not direct blood supply to the chondrocyte or to the matrix around the chondrocyte, there is limited repair capability for cartilage. So again, we have our pericardium, which is here, our matrix, which is shown in black, and then this is a lacuna, and this is a chondrocyte in the center. Again, the blood supply would be out here in the pericardium. The blood supply would be out here in the perichondrium. And it has to be able to work its way in to get to the chondrocyte. There are three types of cartilage. Hyaline, which is most common. It connects the ribs to the sternum, supports passages of the respiratory tract, covers the bone surfaces and joints, and the matrix is made up of packed collagen fibers, packed together. Our second type is elastic. The elastic fibers are resilient and flexible. We see this in the external ear and the epiglottis, which is the flap which covers our windpipe. The fibrocartilage has very little ground substance. Matrix is mostly collagen. It is between our vertebrae and is resistant to compression and absorbs shock. Again, we see the hyaline, which we have our lacuna, which are these little pockets, and inside we have a chondrocyte. With the elastic, we see a lot more of the elastic fibers in the matrix. And then for our fibrocartilage, we see most of the matrix being collagen fiber. Our last supporting connective tissue is going to be bone, or osseous tissue. It is made mostly of hard calcium and collagen. It is strong and resistant to shatter. The lacuna contain osteocytes, which are the living cells. Again, we have a pocket, which is called the lacuna, and an osteocyte inside of it. So the lacuna containing the osteocytes surround blood vessels. Since diffusion cannot occur in the matrix, the bone contains a cytoplasmic extension called the canaliculi that allow nutrients and blood to get to the osteocytes. Bones are also surrounded by a periosteum, and it is constantly being remodeled and repaired. So whenever you see a bullseye-looking pattern, it's most of the time going to be bone. In the very center, we have a haversian canal that contains blood vessels, and then surrounding, so the circles around it contain lacuna. Each one of these lacuna contains a dot, which is the osteocyte. These osteocytes get nutrients through the canaliculi, which are these little extensions. So again, on the haversian canal, we see the lacuna here, 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 and here, and here. Inside each is an osteocyte, and all these little lines we see are canaliculi. So, connective tissue. We have connective tissue proper, which we have loose and dense. We have fluid connective tissue, which is blood and lymph. And finally, we have supportive connective tissue, which is cartilage and bone. So, can you tell me what types of connective tissue have a fluid matrix? So what were the fluid connective tissues? Blood and lymph. How do nutrients get to the osteocytes in the bone? Well, we know in the bone it creates a target-like pattern, and in the very center we have that haversian canal. And we have those little bitty intracellular connections called the canaliculi that bring the nutrients from that canal to the osteocytes. And why does cartilage heal so slowly? Well, cartilage itself doesn't get what? Doesn't have what? It doesn't have blood supply. Just the perichondrium around it gets the blood supply. So it takes a long time for that blood supply and nutrients to actually reach the chondrocyte so that it can start repairing. Well, see you later.